In the last section, we did a quick walkthrough of how our user will flow through our application. Remember, they're going to sign up with Google OAuth, give us some money, create a campaign. That campaign will be sent out to all of their users. Their users will then click some link inside that email, leave some feedback, and then we will present that to the person who sent out the original survey. So I know that it might be already kind of confusing when I use the word user right now, because we're talking about both the product owner and the users who use that product owner's application. But when we say user, we might be referring to the product owner as opposed to that kind of sub-user. Anyways, all this terminology is probably confusing right now, but don't worry, over time it's going to become really clear as we start working on the actual app. So now that we know how a user will flow through the application, let's talk about some of the different technologies we will use to pull this entire thing off. Now, as we talk about these different technologies, we're doing so just to give you a sense of some of the different tech that we're going to be getting through inside this course. This is not necessarily an exhaustive list, and there really is a couple of other libraries that we're going to be using along the way. But I want to just give you a sense of what we're going to be doing and vaguely, somewhat, kind of the order in which we're going to be doing it. We're not going to follow this order of steps right here exactly throughout the course, but kind of it's going to give you an idea of how we might be putting things together. Okay, so first off is handling Google authentication. For that, we're going to be making use of an Express backend server and storing user information inside of MongoDB. To handle the actual authentication and OAuth process, we'll be using a third-party library called Passport.js. Passport.js is going to make the OAuth side of things a lot easier for us to set up. Of course, Passport itself has its own set of challenges, so we'll get through that in time. Next is handling payments. We're not going to be dealing with credit card numbers directly. We're not going to be taking credit cards into our application. Instead, we're going to use a third-party service called Stripe for handling everything around billing inside of our application. Stripe is somewhat like Passport in that it's somewhat easy to get started with, but you also have to be aware of some really edge cases that make life just a little challenging, especially when we're using React with Stripe, believe it or not. So we'll be using Stripe to handle payments, and then whenever a user pays us some amount of money, we'll record that inside of our MongoDB database. Next, whenever a user attempts to create a new campaign or a survey, however you want to refer to it, we'll be making use of React and Redux. Whenever the user starts to enter the list of emails or some details about what they want to collect as far as surveys or feedback, we'll be making use of React, Redux, and Redux Form. So again, these two steps right here, it's really all about the front end of our application, and that's where we're going to see a lot of work with React and Redux Form. After we've collected all this information about this new campaign or survey to send out, we will send out this list of emails to all the surveyees. For that, we're going to be making use of a third-party email provider. This is still going to take a lot of integration on our side to put the emails together to send out, and there's probably going to be the bulk of real complicated stuff inside this course around handling these emails. But that's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to figure out really truthfully how to handle emails very well inside of our application. Now, when a surveyee gets that actual email requesting some amount of feedback, we need to make sure that we somehow record the feedback that the user is given or presents to us. For that, we're going to be using a combination of the email provider, our Express backend, and the MongoDB database. Next, to tabulate all the feedback that we're given, we're going to store all that data inside of MongoDB, and whenever a user wants to see that feedback, we're going to use Mongo. Now I put Mongo question mark right here because we'll kind of figure this part out. There's a lot of different ways that we could handle tabulation of the feedback, but we'll just kind of assume right now that we're going to be using MongoDB for it. Finally, a user should be able to see a report of all their survey responses. And for that, we'll use Mongo. We're going to kind of pull out all the feedback that we've been given out of our database, and then we'll present it to the user by using React and Redux. Okay. So that's essentially, again, the entire flow and how all these different technologies are going to fit in. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. I just want to give you a taste or a sense of what we're doing. At this point, I'm hoping that it's pretty clear exactly how a user is going to flow through our application and what the purpose of the application is. So if you're still confused at all about what we're trying to do with this app and what its purpose is, feel free to jump over to the course discussion on Udemy and just ask me a question. Just say, hey, Steven, I really don't understand what we're building here. Can you go into a little bit more detail? Now, having said that, we are going to look up some mock-ups of the front-end aspects of this application in the next section. So if things are confusing, maybe check out the mock-ups in the last section and then let me know what you think. So let's take a break. We're going to come back to the next section and start looking at some mock-ups of the front-end side of our application. I'll see you in just a second.